Imagine the summer of 1914. Europe saw itself as the pinnacle of civilization. Its empires sprawled across the globe. Its cities gleamed with an unshakable confidence. New technologies were forging a future of endless progress, perfect order, and absolute control. For the people living then, major wars were relics of a less enlightened past. Peace felt like the new normal, and the future seemed guaranteed. But hidden beneath all that glittering elegance, under the surface of grand parades and majestic palaces, the very foundations of their world were starting to fracture. This wasn't a society bracing for disaster. This was a world blissfully unaware that it was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to plunge into an abyss of self-destruction. This is the story of how that world was in the edge of a war. Step back in time with me, to the summer of 1914. Europe stands at the zenith of its power, a continent of empires, confident and majestic. This is the world before the Great War, a world that would soon vanish forever. First, let's look at the British Empire, the empire on which the sun never set. From the bustling docks of London, its influence stretched across the globe. The Royal Navy, the undisputed master of the seas, projected British power to every corner of the earth. In the streets of London, you can feel the energy, the confidence of a global superpower. Palaces gleam, red-coated soldiers march with impeccable precision, and the air is thick with the promise of prosperity. It's an empire built on trade, tradition, and unwavering self-belief. Now, journey east, to the heart of the continent, the German Empire. Forged in iron and blood just a few decades earlier, Germany is Europe's new industrial powerhouse. Berlin is a city of ambition, a testament to German engineering and military might. Look at the disciplined ranks of soldiers in their spiked helmets, the Pickelhaube, a symbol of this rising force. The Kaiser reviews his troops, a monarch overseeing a nation brimming with industrial strength and a desire to claim its own place in the sun. The air crackles with a potent mix of pride and restless energy. Next, we move to the venerable Austro-Hungarian Empire, a sprawling, multi-ethnic tapestry ruled from the grand city of Vienna. This is a world of waltzes, gilded opera houses, and ancient traditions. The Habsburg dynasty has ruled for centuries, and their capital reflects a deep history and cultural richness. Yet, beneath the surface of imperial balls and military parades, you can sense the strains. So many different peoples, languages, and cultures are held together under one crown. It's a beautiful, complex, but fragile mosaic, shimmering in the last rays of a long, golden afternoon. Further east lies the immense Russian Empire, the sleeping giant of Europe. From the glittering spires of St. Petersburg, the Tsar rules over a vast and diverse land. Here, opulence and poverty exist side by side. We see the splendor of the Romanov court, the royal family beloved by some, while countless peasants toil in the fields. The Russian army, the famous steamroller, is enormous, its sheer size a source of both strength and concern for its neighbors. Russia is a land of deep faith, stark contrasts, and a simmering revolutionary spirit, waiting just below the surface. Finally, we arrive in the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, as it was known, centered in Constantinople, a city that straddles two continents. This ancient empire is a shadow of its former glory. Though its influence has waned, its cultural legacy is undeniable. The mosques and bustling bazaars still speak of a rich history, but change is in the air. Young officers and reformers dream of modernizing their nation, even as other powers look upon its territories with greedy eyes. There's a sense of grandeur in decay, a feeling that this old world is holding on by a thread. These five great empires, each a world unto itself, stood on the brink of a cataclysm. They were powerful, proud, and intertwined in a complex web of alliances, rivalries, and ambitions. In the summer of 1914, they saw a future of continued glory. They had no idea they were marching toward a war that would shatter their world and redraw the map of Europe forever. The year is 1914. Europe stands at the zenith of its power, a continent of empires basking in the long summer of the Belle Epoque. Cities like Paris, Vienna, and London hum with life. The streets are filled with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages and the excited chatter of citizens enjoying cafes and promenades. Art, science, and industry are flourishing. It feels like an age of unending progress, a golden era of peace and prosperity. But look closer. Beneath this glittering surface, the foundations of this peaceful world are cracking. A web of rivalries, ambitions, and fears is silently pulling the great powers apart. In the grand halls of power, maps are being redrawn not with ink, but with unspoken threats. Secret alliances are forged in the shadows, creating two armed camps, the Triple Entente and the Central Powers. These lines, invisible to the public, are tripwires for a continent-wide conflict. The signs are everywhere, if one knows where to look. Military parades, once a symbol of national pride, now serve as a show of force. Thousands of soldiers march in perfect unison, their polished boots echoing on the cobblestones. In the arsenals, new cannons, marvels of industrial engineering, are inspected and polished, ready for a war nobody dares to name. Down at the naval yards, colossal steel dreadnoughts, the pride of their nations, steam out into the open sea. Britain's Royal Navy, the ruler of the waves, watches warily as Germany's high seas fleet grows ever stronger. An unprecedented arms race is underway, consuming national budgets and fueling mutual suspicion. Each nation believes its military might is purely for defense, a guarantee of its own security. Yet, with every new battleship launched and every new battalion trained, the continent edges closer to the abyss. The air is thick with a strange mixture of optimism and anxiety. While ordinary people go about their lives, planning for the future, their leaders are trapped in a cycle of escalation. Driven by a rigid logic of power and prestige, they see war not as a catastrophe, but as a potential tool of statecraft, a final, decisive argument. This is Europe on the eve of destruction. A magnificent, intricate machine of culture and civilization, but also a powder keg with a lit fuse. The intricate dance of diplomacy has become a march towards war. The people enjoy the sunshine, unaware that the sky is about to be filled with the smoke of cannons and that their world is about to be shattered forever. The long peace is coming to an end, and a storm of unimaginable violence is gathering just over the horizon. On the surface, it's an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity, the Belle Epoque, a beautiful era. Grand cities like London, Paris, and Vienna are centers of art and innovation. But beneath this glittering facade, a complex web of alliances and rivalries is pulling the continent apart, setting the stage for a conflict that will change the world forever. Let's look at the map of Europe. It's a delicate balance of power, divided into two major armed camps. First, we have the Triple Entente. See the lines connecting Great Britain, an island empire with the world's most powerful navy. France, still wary of its neighbor across the Rhine, and the vast Russian Empire, stretching across to continents. These three powers, once rivals, have found common ground, united by a shared suspicion of the growing strength in the heart of Europe, and that brings us to their counterparts, the Triple Alliance. In the center, we have the German Empire, a new, ambitious industrial powerhouse with a formidable army. Allied with Germany is the sprawling, multi-ethnic Austro-Hungarian Empire, a state grappling with internal nationalist movements. And then there's Italy, the third member, whose commitment to the alliance is perhaps the most uncertain of all. These alliances were meant to keep the peace, a system of mutual defense designed to deter aggression. The logic was simple: an attack on one is an attack on all. But instead of ensuring stability, this intricate network created a tripwire. A small, regional conflict could now quickly escalate, dragging the entire continent into war. In the grand halls and stately offices of Europe's capitals, diplomats negotiate and ministers strategize. They pore over maps, calculating risks and drawing up plans. Monarchs and emperors, many of them cousins by blood, review military parades and oversee war games, preparing for a war they all believe is coming, yet one that few truly understand. Notice the dark clouds gathering over the Balkans, a region known as the powder keg of Europe. Here, the interests of the great powers collide with the fervent desires of smaller nations for independence. Tensions are simmering, especially between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. It is here, in this volatile region, that a single spark will ignite the inferno. The peace is fragile, the atmosphere is electric with suspicion, and the world holds its breath, unaware that the summer of 1914 will be its last summer of peace for a very long time. The old order is starting to crack, and nowhere is this more visible than in a region that would soon be known as the powder keg of Europe, the Balkans. For centuries, this crossroads of civilizations had been dominated by two sprawling, multi-ethnic empires, the Austro-Hungarian Empire to the north and the Ottoman Empire to the south. Look at this map from the time. See how their borders stretch across dozens of different peoples, each with their own language, culture, and a growing dream of independence. These weren't just lines on a map, they were walls holding back a flood of ambition. As the 1910s began, the Ottoman Empire, once a mighty force, was weakening. It was called the sick man of Europe for a reason. Its grip on its Balkan territories was slipping, and as it pulled back, it left a power vacuum. This was the moment the newly independent Balkan states Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, and Montenegro had been waiting for. They saw a chance to reclaim lands they considered their own, lands populated by people who shared their heritage. In 1912, they formed an unlikely alliance, the Balkan League, and declared war on the Ottoman Empire. The First Balkan War was a stunning success for the League. They drove the Ottomans almost completely out of Europe in a matter of months, but this victory was short-lived. The victors immediately began to argue amongst themselves over the spoils. How would they divide this newly liberated territory? The map they had dreamed of didn't match the reality on the ground. This led directly to the Second Balkan War in 1913, where Bulgaria, feeling cheated, fought against its former allies. The conflict was brutal and redrew the map once again, leaving a legacy of bitterness and unresolved rivalries. Serbia, in particular, emerged from these wars stronger and more ambitious than ever. Its leaders dreamed of a greater Serbia, a powerful state that would unite all South Slavs. But there was a major obstacle to this dream: Austria-Hungary. The empire feared Serbia's growing influence, seeing it as a threat to its own diverse territories, which included millions of Slavs. The tension between Vienna and Belgrade became the central fault line in European politics. In city squares across the Balkans, crowds gathered, waving national flags and calling for freedom. Small but proud armies paraded through the streets, symbols of a newfound and fierce independence. Meanwhile, in the grand palaces of Vienna and Istanbul, aging emperors and anxious diplomats watched these events with growing alarm. The air was thick with suspicion and conspiracy. Secret alliances were forged, and military plans were drawn up. Every nation was preparing for a conflict they all felt was inevitable, yet no one truly understood the scale of the catastrophe they were about to unleash. Europe in 1914 was a continent on a knife's edge. It was a world of old empires and new nations, of clashing ambitions and deep-seated grievances. All it would take was a single spark in the Balkan powder keg to ignite the entire continent. And that spark was about to be lit. At the dawn of the 20th century, Europe was a continent of empires, a dazzling patchwork of power, industry, and ambition. For decades, a delicate balance had been maintained through a web of alliances, rivalries, and royal family ties. It was an era of unprecedented progress, the Belle Epoque, where arts and sciences flourished, and cities like Paris, London, and Vienna pulsed with life and confidence. But beneath this glittering surface, deep-seated tensions were simmering. Imperial ambitions clashed in Africa and Asia, A naval arms race between Britain and Germany escalated, and in the volatile Balkans, the powder keg of Europe, nationalist dreams threatened to tear the old empires apart. The great powers, bound by their treaties, were drawing invisible lines in the sand. Every nation was preparing for a war they believed would be swift and decisive, a short, sharp conflict to settle old scores. They were all wrong. The world stood blissfully unaware on the edge of a cliff. They were all wrong. The world stood blissfully unaware on the edge of a cliff.